Welcome, Gunrunner.
As Japan started to take over from the United States as the major producer of arcade video games, it was only natural that we would start to see some interesting quirks in the way that these titles were named. Japanese is famously one of the hardest languages to learn, and thusly one of the most troublesome to translate into English too. This meant that on occasion the English translations of game titles often didn't make as much sense as they did in their original language, and sounded rather strange to our Western ears. But there was also occasions where they got the translation totally wrong, and ended up with something very different to what was originally intended. And those are the games we're going to be looking at today. 5 classic coin-ops with strangely concocted titles that don't really make much sense. The game that very much saved Nintendo's arcade game division after several expensive flops. A lot has been said about the naming convention behind Donkey Kong over the years, and much of it is actually wrong. The often repeated tale tells us that the name of the game was supposed to be Monkey Kong, but the translator at Nintendo mistook an M for a D. Looking at the name itself, this does sound quite plausible, but when you actually think about the logic behind that, you start to question it more. I mean, are we supposed to believe that a company like Nintendo couldn't get a competent translator? And yes, the story is utter nonsense. The name most certainly isn't a mistranslation. The truth is that the Donkey Kong name is more of a case of a lack of understanding of the English language than any kind of stupid mistake. And actually the word stupid is key here, because Nintendo were looking for a title that basically said stupid ape. The Kong part is obvious, that came from King Kong, and even led to Nintendo fighting a lawsuit over their use of it, which they did actually win. But the other part is pretty interesting, because when Nintendo were looking at synonyms for stupid, they came across the word donkey. I have to confess that I've called people donkeys when they're being stupid on many occasions, so it certainly works in that context. The problem is that Nintendo didn't realise that it was taken from the animal, they just liked the sound of it. So there we have it. Donkey Kong wasn't a mistranslation at all, it was just a poor understanding of the English language. The tale behind Tankum is definitely one of the lesser known stories here, but also one of the most interesting. It's almost too stupid to believe. When the excellent dungeon crawler was being developed by Konami, they came up with the name Tutankhamun, taken from the famous 18th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh, who is immortalised with the discovery of his grand golden death mask. Given the game involved raiding a series of cursed tombs, the moniker seemed perfect. They set their artist to work, who came up with some pretty wonderful artwork to adorn the cabinet, and then they discovered something of their own. The name didn't fit. Tutankhamun was simply too long to fit on the standard marquee that they wanted to use, and so they had to have a very quick rethink, as the game was ready to ship. The answer the top brass came up with was to simply shorten it, and the result was Tankum. It might have been somewhat of a bodge, but you have to admit that it works quite well. The official home conversions of the game kept the same name, but interestingly some of the unofficial ports, like this one for the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, used the original title. If you thought the Tankum story was stupid, then prepare to be blown away, because this one is even more ridiculous. Now, those of you who are already familiar with this enjoyable Saibu Kaihatsu arcade game, perhaps through the excellent Sega Master System conversion, will no doubt be thinking the game's called Dead Angle, right? And yes, it is. Well, kind of, because all the Western versions of the game are indeed called Dead Angle, but the original Japanese version isn't, because some idiot at Saibu Kaihatsu got the spelling wrong. The game was already out in the wild before somebody spotted the mistake, and Japanese distributors Tecmo initially came up with a new name in Gang Hunter, before the Western licensee Fabtech settled on the correct version of the name, Dead Angle. I don't know why they didn't just call it Empire City 2, to follow on from its predecessor. That would have solved an awful lot of problems. I don't think there's any doubt that Pac-Man is the most famous example of a game name being altered slightly from its original spelling, and even though it's not a mistranslation as such, I felt it was worthy of inclusion here. You see, when the famous maze munching arcade game debuted in Japan in May 1980, it was known as Pacman. The name actually came from the sound that the hungry yellow pizza slice made when he was eating. Think about it. Puck, puck, puck. And indeed, the name was kept for Midway's Western release of the game. Well, initially anyway, because they quickly discovered that all these original cabinets were being defaced. I don't think I need to tell you what was being changed, but in case you're half asleep watching this and it's not immediately obvious, the P was replaced with an F. And I'm sure you can just imagine how well that went down with arcade owners and parents alike. Midway subsequently recalled all existing Pac-Man cabinets and changed the name to Pac-Man, although a few did actually survive, and I even remember seeing one at the Haven Holiday Park in Caister as a kid. It's funny to think that a character as famous and iconic as Pac-Man was originally called something else, and it was just some unwanted graffiti that changed the course of history forever. Taito's Continental Circus proved to be a pretty big hit when it was first unleashed on arcade audiences back in 1987, and rightly so. It was the best F1 racer we had seen since pole position. Aside from all the praise heaped upon the game, much was made at the time of the title, especially when the home conversion started to arrive. It was claimed in the press that the name was supposed to be Continental Circuits, and the second part of the name had been mistranslated. This was very much backed up by the fact that many of the existing cabinets had updated side art and marquees adorned with the Continental Circuit's name instead, despite the title screen staying the same. However, the so-called wrong name does actually make sense, because the term circus has long been attributed to Formula 1, pointing to the fact that the teams travel from city to city, setting up tents by the track for the team to work in, much like a traditional circus. Indeed, there are several F1 games that use the term circus in their title too, like Nichibatsu's F1 Circus and F1 Super Circus. This had led people to suggest that the name wasn't really mistranslated at all, and nobody from Taito has ever said otherwise. But I personally believe that the renaming of arcade cabinets suggests that the story is very much true.
I'm gonna jump, you're gonna crunch. Here we go.
Donkey Kong!
More crunch.
Donkey Kong cereal!
Absolutely. Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong cereal is part of this complete breakfast. You love the crunch!
And that rounds up my look at 5 arcade games with mistranslated names. Can you think of any other games that have wrongly translated names? And what are your memories of the titles that I did include? I always love to hear the thoughts and views from my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Mitchell Valentino, Neptune, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Dos Gamerman, Nathan Davino, Tiago Piera dos Santos Silva, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to a host of extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.